Okay, it's time now for our regular Africa News Review, which we do on a Wednesday here on our program. To help us unpack some of the stories that have made headlines this week, we joined in the studio by a researcher at the Center for the Study of Democracy at the University of Johannesburg. That's Gideon Chitanga. Gideon, good morning, and thank you very much for your time. Two stories sort of coming from, in West Africa and Central Africa, the Great Lakes area, that have caught our attention this week. Ivory Coast, I mean, the weekend was literally a bloody weekend at the Grand Bassam beach. At least 18 people killed there. Yesterday, we saw the visit to Cote d'Ivoire, to Ivory Coast, by the two French ministers, Foreign Affairs Minister and Interior Ministry, and also from the region, visitors from neighboring countries, Togo and Benin, offering their help. A concerning development, what we've seen in Ivory Coast.
Yes, I think it is really a worrying pattern in terms of it demonstrating the frequency and the vulnerability of the region to attacks by terrorist groups. I understand that AQIM has claimed responsibility. And you can see...
That's the Al-Qaeda North Africa branch.
Yes. You can see a pattern where these Al-Qaeda affiliated groups are targeting key strategic areas where you find high numbers of foreigners, but you also find prominent groups of local people in these areas. So it's hotels, it's resources, it's resorts. And these areas which are key to particularly the economy of these countries have become increasingly vulnerable to attacks by Islamists.
But the Ivorian security seem to have responded very, very quickly at the time in terms of tracking down those attackers. Does it mean that they've got the military now the right strategy?
We can commend them for the level of vigilance once they learned about the attack. But the issue here is that these countries in the Sahel region and in the Islamic Maghreb, they have to improve their counter-terrorism strategies so that they are capable and able to preempt any potential attacks before human life is lost.
So is it good news then, France yesterday vowing to step up anti-terrorist cooperation in Africa after this Al-Qaeda attack?
I think so. But the most important thing we should understand is that the situation in the region is extremely precarious. You are looking at Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab, and AQIM, and these Islamic groups are interacting within that region. So there is need to increase their capacity, to boost their skills, to also provide for the technologies, to fund these counter-terrorism activities.
I guess there's also a need for a regional approach and a regional response to the terrorism.
Definitely, the African Union should chip in, and the regional groups, both in the northern part of Africa and the western part of Africa, should be proactive to make sure that they have a permanent force that is readily equipped to react to such situations.
Okay, we've seen the news this week, disturbing news coming out of Europe, that the EU is suspending its direct financial support to Burundi. And we know that Burundi is one of the poorest countries in the world. And then there's been ongoing violence there. More than 400 people have been killed since April last year when Pierre Nkurunziza got himself a third term.
Yes, Burundi will lose about 90 million euro in terms of budget support. It will also lose different levels and amounts of finance with respect to support towards healthy and other social programs.
Apparently, the total amount is about 430 million euros.
Yes, and given the poverty in Burundi, this is really serious. But the big question is, will this be enough to push Nkurunziza to embrace the AU agenda in terms of engaging the opposition and sticking to the dialogue that might stem the current stasis or the political crisis in the country? I don't foresee that Nkurunziza will be moved. And for me, the challenge is the lack of credibility of the mediators from the region.
Okay, before you go, Gideon, very quickly, Yuvek and I were talking about the Omar al-Bashir case, the Supreme Court of Appeal in South Africa dismissing the appeal by the state. I mean, and that warrant of arrest is still out there by the ICC. And you just wonder, where does this put South Africa, and especially in relation to the AU and the diplomatic immunity of a sitting African president?
I think there's a tricky party where the South African government could have initiated or driven the arrest of a sitting president. But there is a paradox, and the paradox is probably the most interesting part. South Africa is coming out as embarrassed. It's an embarrassing situation when you look at the fact that South Africa has to be responsible for enforcing international conventions to which it is a signatory. And I think in that sense, it's problematic for President Zuma and the government of South Africa to just have ignored and created a legal rush which has taken the government to this point. It's embarrassing.
Thank you very much. That's the researcher at the Center for the Study of Democracy at the University of Johannesburg, Gideon Chitanga, giving us some of his insights about some of the stories that have captured headlines on our continent so far this week.